At this point, we've now got our mechanism and our clock face, and we've got a retaining ring which is able to double as a wall hanger, and that's great. But if we look at our project, especially if we look at that retaining ring, you can kind of see we might have a bit of a problem. You see, that's not really thick enough to hold the mechanism in place. I mean, the mechanism is pretty fat and the retaining ring is really skinny. It's not going to work. I need to have more copies of this retaining ring. The retaining rings will all be cut out of flat material, so I'm going to have to make duplicates of them in order to get them and then stick them together, to glue them together, to build them up to the thickness that we want. So how do we do that? Well, it's relatively easy. In this video, we're going to learn then how to make copies of components and then how to joint them in place so that they always end up where we want them. To do this, I'm going to invoke the move copy command. Now, move copy can be brought up by pressing the M key, which I'm going to do, but you can also do that under modify, under move copy. So there it is. And you've also got it up on the toolbar where you've got this, handy dandy tool here. So I click there and it says, move object. And you can select different kinds of objects. In this case, I want to do a component because most of the things I made were components. It's asking me to select a component, so I will. I will select the retaining ring. It highlights and it says, OK. Now, here's the trick. Down here at the bottom of this dialog, I'm going to say create copy. And it will do that. And as soon as I've said create copy, it gives me the move sort of reticles here. And I can move this stuff up and down. I'm just going to move it way out of position here just so that I can sort of clearly show you that I've made a copy of it. I'll move it way down and then say OK. So now we've got one retaining ring, wall hanger thingy, and we've got another one sitting there. And they're over here in our data tree. We've got retaining ring 1 and retaining ring 2. What I need to do now is connect them together so they are always stuck together to show what it'll be like when I glue them together. All right, so here we go. Let's do it. I'm going to now joint them together. And I go under the Assemble menu and say Joint. I click Joint, and the first thing I want to do is from the first component that I want to joint, I want to zoom in and choose a spot on its surface. Now you'll notice that as soon as I mouse over the sketch profile, it changes, and I've got these little triangles all over the place, and I've got this half moon shape. That half moon shape is the beginning of the joint. And so I'm going to say, all right, you know what? I'm going to join this. Hang on, I'll move it in position here. Just need to move over here. There we go. Okay, I want to snap that thing, and you can see where it snapped in. That little half moon shape went there, and I click on that, and then it went transparent. And it's gone transparent because it's saying, all right, I know where to start. I need to joint that thing there, and you'll notice that I went to the underside of the retaining ring. I want to join the underside of that up here onto this one. I want to snap it in there. Then as soon as I click component 2, and you'll notice that I've already identified component 1 over here. You can see it all there, right? Component 2 now, I need to then identify where on component 2 I want it to snap to. In this case, it's going to go right there. And as soon as I click, it's going to move it into place. So watch the birdie. I click it, and boom, it snaps it into place. And now it's got this icon here. That icon is the joint icon for a rigid joint. And so that means it's going to act like it's glued together. And if I click on the Motion tab, you'll see that I have all these different kinds of joint. The first one is a rigid joint, and that means it's not going to move. It's rigid. And that's what I want. That's going to sort of imitate what gluing it together would be like. And I say, OK, and it's done. That's lovely. I've done it. I've moved my second retaining ring into position. It's great. I could continue this if I wanted to and do a variation of that. So I can go up to retaining ring 1, and I'll make another one. I'll say copy, and then here I can say paste instead of bringing up the move copy command. It's going to do the same thing, but let's do this variation of it. So I say paste, and boom, it's asking me to do the same thing. I'm just going to move that out of position for now, and I'll say OK. Again, I'm in the situation where I've got this thing floating in space. I don't want that. Let's joint it together. So I go to the Assemble menu. I say Joint, and then on the underside there, I'll zoom in so I can see it. And I want it to go from that position right there. I'll zoom way in. There it is. I snap there. And now it wants to know, okay, well, that's the beginning of the joint. Where am I going to end up? And so I'll zoom out and zoom way in to where I want it to go. And I click again, and it moves it into position, and shazam, we're done. Okay, so now I've got my 3 retaining rings in position. They're all jointed together. Let's test it. Let's see if that actually worked. So in order to test it, I'm going to change the thickness of my material. Because if I change the thickness and I make it thinner or thicker, those parts should move together now. So the thickness is currently set at 5. I'll set it at 3, and I'll say OK. And look, they all stayed together. They're all still stuck together because they're jointed. And so the bottom of one retaining ring is stuck to the top side of the other one, and they'll all keep moving together just like that. So there we go. How to copy things and joint them together so we can snap them into place in our designs. All done.